My name is Fabio Terezinho. I'm the VP of Consulting Services with InduSoft. At InduSoft, we develop HMI, SCADA, MES systems. We have a strong footprint in oil and gas industries, and we designed the product in the application that Mike demonstrated here, where they can monitor literally thousands of RTUs from a cloud-based system, and we work with other major vendors in the industry as well.
Okay, great. Our first question is to Clinton, and it's what other areas in oil and gas upstream do you see automation heading?
What I showed the drilling. There's very obvious areas. So we're also looking into how we can look at doing completions, automating that, and then also maybe moving even into well services, fracking, cementing. There's a large opportunity to start pulling those things together, and there's a lot. And if after Macondo, you can see the issues there with BOPs, automatic closing of BOPs would be another area where you could see a lot more standards and things, and the use of, say, Opc Ua and other standards coming in. So.
Okay, great. Mark, asking you the same question as far as what other areas do you see automating heading in your applications?
Well, is this on?
Yep.
We have quite a few underway right now. I think one thing that would help is if we would communicate in more from a business process perspective what it is that we're trying to accomplish. And we've been trying to do that more. For instance, within ProtoMel, we've created something called the ProtoMel Roadmap, and we have two major tracks on the ProtoMel Roadmap. One is basically surveillance and optimization, which is focused on well flow and reservoir optimization. And these are A2A type technical solutions, but they're intended to address specific business problems. And we're trying to get the operating companies to come forward with those. The second track is something called industry reporting, and there are three sub-tracks on that. One is regulatory reporting. One is what we call non-operated joint venture reporting, which is essentially the operating company reporting to the joint interest partners or non-operating partners. And then the third one is for well services and well completions. This is where you have the oilfield services companies that are doing work for the operating companies. When they get done, they basically hand us, the operators, spreadsheets or PDFs that have the data, which goes straight to our land. And if we could get those into a different format, we can get the data directly into our company databases and make better use of it. So I think if we would focus on business processes and communicate that out to the people who are not involved with industry standards, we may create a better pool for it, and then we wouldn't be answering that question from an industry standards organization perspective. We would be having the industry tell us where the need is.
Okay, great. And I'll ask that same question to Mike, as far as where do you see the automation heading in your business?
We're going to focus on adding dashboards for predicting for the field operators what might fail next, like for the batteries, how many estimated days you have left of them by the droppage, or any of the wells that are not flowing over the time. We're going to try to predict device failures for them. So when they're analyzing, instead of looking over the trends and trying to decide for themselves, give them a dashboard and a tool to be able to do that.
Okay, great. I got a question for Tom Burke. What Opc Ua toolkits are available to build an OPC client or server?
I don't know. I'm allowed to answer that one. There are a number of vendors that bring toolkits to market. There's a lot of commercial off-the-shelf products. Many of the toolkits, as a matter of fact, Clinton actually started to embrace one and talk about one, whether you knew it or not. But there's a number of the vendors that actually offer the information model directly built into it. So there's at least 10 different companies that I know that offer commercial off-the-shelf toolkits. The foundation also provides a wealth of technology as well as part of this. And many of the collaborations actually that OPC is doing, and my colleagues back in the room are from FDI, are actually looking at ways of propagating the technology and building commercial offerings that really enable rapid deployment of the technology.
Okay, great. Another question for Clinton. What part of the drilling process can leverage Opc Ua?
Well, I mean, I think it's really the entire thing, because what you're trying to do is you have a lot of surface measurements and downhole measurements you're trying to combine. One in order to automate. The other one, a lot of this is just to get the data back to either a data historian or a data aggregator, and then even transmitting up to something like an enterprise server where you would transmit across VSAT out to a location and then transmit maybe into a client's office or into your own home office. So it could be quite broad all the way through that, all the way from the chain, all the way through the chain. Okay. And let me add one more thing. Where I don't think it's applicable, is downhole. I mean, as soon as you start thinking downhole, you're really down to custom protocols at that point. But anything above that is fair game.
Okay, and the second part of the question, there are OPC server for Witsmil on the market.
No, there's not. For WitsML, I think that and actually what we're seeing is WitsML, it doesn't map directly onto the Opc Ua namespace, so you can maybe take parts of it and start seeing similarities. But I think from the SP-DSAT's point of view, I think what we'd like to see is maybe a standard that could pick up something like WitsML and that would fit better with sort of a real-time toolkit, and that those two would be able to work together more easily. And the contextual data, things like description of the BHA or the rig, they would be able to work more closely together than this sort of disparity that's sort of between them right now as far as their distance apart. And this is where Tom's work on the Leadership Council, I think, is going to be very, very helpful to try to pull a lot of these standards together.
Okay. I have a question from Mark. Where does one get the standard development kit?
Okay, I didn't. It wasn't lit up. I don't have the green light on this one, but it's available on download. I believe it's licensed through the Apache license. You can go to the Energistics website, and they'll give you a link to where it's at. But it's free and publicly available.
Okay. I have another question for Tom Burke. Can an end user become an OPC Foundation member, and what are the benefits?
Yes. Okay. One doesn't. Talk closer to it, Andy? Okay. Yes, we actually have probably about 25% of our membership is actually end users. And the end users are probably the strongest advocates, making sure that the suppliers are doing the right things, basically building products and then making sure they're certified. The standard things are they get a wealth of information of the specifications, the technology, and more importantly, access to a lot of the tools and technology, particularly in the areas of certification, that really allows validation. So if you're a supplier in the room, listen to your end users because they make the purchasing decisions and make sure you certify your products.
Okay, great. Then I have one last two-part question that I'm going to be asking the entire panel, and then we'll conclude this section and go over to the Internet of Things. So for each of you, and I guess we can start at the end with Mark, what are your future plans? And do you have any issues of concerns regarding security or the cloud?
Well, honestly, we haven't really begun thinking that far. We've had some preliminary discussions that we might need to think about some things like Hadoop and MapReduce and what we might do with those, but we have not begun those discussions. As the security aspects so far, the vendor have been, well, we've relied on the vendors who have implemented the standards to deliver some kind of security mechanism for the data exchange that they're doing. The standards organization has not really pushed any. Now, with that said, I mentioned the ProdML roadmap earlier, and some of the roadmap tracks where we're talking about doing data exchange with other parties. We've begun looking at some instances where people have implemented an externally hosted solution, and I know the Norwegians have done this, where they have something called the EBM reporting hub, and we're looking at it as kind of a model, but the operating companies can post their drilling and production data out there, and the regulatory agency, the Norwegian Petroleum Directorate, can pull it down, but also the non-operating partners can pull the data down, drilling or production data, and it's externally hosted, but there's a security layer in there. There's a number of cloud standards organizations, and some of them are looking at security within the cloud, but we just have not engaged them yet.
Okay, Mike?
We will continue to develop tools for the field that helps increase production and focus on what they need. As far as the cloud, it's the risk benefit. You know, we have to for security. Just like he said, it's still we can depend on our vendors. Also, that the risk benefit, you have to make sure that it outweighs it to continue using it.
Okay, great. Clinton?
Yeah, so I think, you know, for Schlumberger in general, I think what we see is a strong move away from build it yourself, right? I mean, Schlumberger's built it out of necessity, had to build a lot of these things. And now you can start seeing, because of all the standards work and things that have been done, that picking things up off the shelf and using those is becoming much, much easier to do in terms of, you know, don't design your own digital control boards, you know, just buy it, right? It's a much easier thing to do and lets us focus on our own business. In terms of security, I mean, I think, you know, Opc Ua has done a fantastic job in implementing the certificate mechanism that's built within it, and I don't really see that I don't have a concern at this point, other than trying to use the certificates. I think that's a fairly difficult thing to do, but once you get that in place, that it does feel very secure, and I think they paid a lot of attention to that at the beginning. Some of the other standards, you know, like say Modbus and things, you have to be very, of course, we're isolating those as necessary to ensure that that type of security is maintained. But around Opc Ua, I don't see that there's an issue.
Okay, and Fabio, from your perspective, your future plans, and also your perspective on security in the cloud solution.
Yeah, for future or even for present, but the deployment of the technology that we recently released, we keep using standards Opc Ua. We're seeing more and more traction of Opc Ua, even though it's available for a few years. For the past 12 months or so, we're seeing a huge adoption. We are also seeing more demand for cross-platform solutions. So the web interface that Mike demonstrated uses standards like ADTML5, which are cross-platform. So the idea is to collect data anywhere from any device, create a layer of abstraction, and make this information available anywhere, regardless of the platform, from Microsoft, iOS, Android, any platform. And from the security point of view, there is always two main factors for security. One is technology, but the second one is processes. And many times people focus only on technology, and you might have the most secure system, the best software regarding security. If your processes are not in place, you are vulnerable. So talking about technology, Opc Ua is a huge improvement compared to the classic version, the DA, HDA, AE, the previous versions. Using features like certificates, authentication, we are able to, in this project, have a very secure connection between the client and the server, and the flexibility to do that across different networks, VPNs, or even the internet, with a very secure manner for current standards. And when it comes to the thin clients, to the consumer network, then we also leverage other standards like SSL, HTTPS to encrypt the data. And the real question, like Mike put it, it's a risk-benefit. I used to say the only system 100% secure is a system that does not work, conceptually speaking. But the fact is, with the technology available today, you can make a system so secure that from a practical point of view can be considered close to 100% secure.
Okay, great. And final, Tom?
So to close on that, my vision's about collaboration. My vision's about embedded all the way to the enterprise, and my vision's about leveraging technology that makes sense from a business value perspective. Specifically, enabling the technology and using the technology that we have on our smartphones and the Internet of Things. And the next thing you're going to hear about is what we've done with our partnership with TIA deliberately for M2M. And then you're going to hear, a lot about, as we're moving forward, about the whole concept tomorrow of device configuration and how we've standardized device configuration across the multitude of Ethernet, consortium and how this comes together. The partnership we have with, the PLC Open and the MES arena, okay? And I can keep naming them. The partnership and the work that we're doing with Energistics and the Standard Leadership Council and about propagating information and information modeling using the standards and the cross-pollination across all the standards organizations.